Number 10. He was never found. November 1971 was a day just like any other. It was the 70s, so life was good, or so that's what I'm told from people who lived through the 70s. I don't know, I wasn't there. An airplane was flying from Oregon to Seattle. This is where our main character appropriated the vehicle for himself, where he managed to ransom $200,000 cash. Then, like a true nutcase, jumped out of said airplane and parachuted to safety. More on that later. To this day, we have no idea who D.B. Cooper was. All we know is that some of the ransom money was found by a river in 1980. Again, more on that later. Which did spark new interest, but not a lot of new leads. All we really do know is that he bought the airline ticket with cash under the name Dan Cooper, or D.B. Cooper. Multiple theories exist about who he may be, including a man named Richard Fly McCoy, who had done similar crimes. The FBI isn't convinced, as today D.B. Cooper remains the only air piracy case still unsolved. Number 9. The name's Bond. James Bond. That's right, lass. Part of the mystery or fascination of the D.B. Cooper case is how slick it was, how it went so smooth, oh yes, almost without a hitch, very similar to the aerial escapades of a certain MI6 spy. The comparisons are pretty easy to make, especially when you consider what the man was wearing at the time, a full black suit and tie with a black briefcase. According to witnesses on the scene, he had a very pleasant and charming demeanor. Ooh, just like Mr. Bond, yes. Ordered 2 bourbons from the booze cart, paid his bill, and even offered to tip the flight attendant. Very Sean Connery of you, yes. Even during the theft of the plane, he kept his cool as he instructed pilots to fly low in order for him to complete his jump from the plane. That's just, what a crazy story. Number 8. Fake agent. This is too strange not to talk about. So 2 weeks before the D.B. Cooper incident, a man on another plane sat down with some pilots. Now this was the 70s, so you could do that if you were smooth enough and wealthy enough. While he was there, he was telling the pilots that he was a big shot in the movie business and was asking aviation questions relating to a load dropping out of a plane and landing in a specific spot. For a movie. Yeah, that makes sense, sure. For a movie he was helping to make, even handing out a pamphlet of the movie. The non-existent movie. Weird. The man's description matched that of a witness who saw D.B. Cooper at that incident. When the pilots of the plane with the movie mogul were interviewed, they couldn't remember the name of the movie, pamphlet, or that of the man that they let sit with them. That sounds like an inside job. I don't know. It's weird. That's weird. Number 7. Rest in peace. A good reason no one has ever heard or saw him again is that there's a slight chance he didn't make it. And by slight I mean a good chance he didn't make it. Okay, let's say you were going to jump out of a plane at night carrying pounds and pounds of cold hard cash with you. If you've ever played Payday, you know what I'm talking about. It's heavy. And you're flying low to the ground with low visibility. You wouldn't have much time to maneuver your parachute. Then you have to deal with being in the middle of the Washington wilderness. This is the 1970s, so that means no cell phones, no GPS. Some experts believe he perished in the fall, or the wilderness claimed him. No one's really sure. The only thing I can think of is that maybe he had a map and some small survival gear in his briefcase, instead of what he actually said he had in there. At least enough to get him out of the woods and then back to civilization. I think, that's my theory, I don't know. Number 6. Interview. In 1972, the Seattle Flag held an interview with a man claiming to be the man who made the daring criminal escapade. Their evidence was that they had one of the $20 bills he stole from the plane. The paper also claimed that they had gone to great lengths to confirm that this was in fact the crook they were looking for. This is the crook you're looking for. But I also used to tell Miss Middleton in English class that I read the books that she assigned for the class, when in reality I used Cliff Notes and then only read about 5 pages of the book. I'm sorry, it just wasn't happening. Then I charmed the rest of my way through her class. Yeah, nice, great. The interview is interesting as the mystery man claims there was no accomplice on the ground and that he will return after 5 years when the statute of limitations expired. Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna happen, dude. You're gonna do a crime, come back 5 years later? You can't just, doesn't work like that. Can't do that. Number 5, plot device. If you're gonna take something away from all of this, I guess it's that, well, it just makes a good story. Heck, it's why I'm standing here before you today. It shouldn't come as a surprise that D.B. Cooper gets used as a theme or plot device in Hollywood. It's naturally a good story, so all you have to do is add say for example, 3 estranged friends go on a camping trip to honor the loss of their 4th buddy, but after a menagerie of misfortunes bestow upon them in the forest, they come across the remains of D.B. Cooper and his fortune. Poor guys were up a creek without a paddle. What would we call that movie? Huh. He's been mentioned in books, shows, movies, and for me, one of the silliest quips from Saul Goodman is him describing Walter's Heisenberg attire as D.B. Cooper. Why so mysterious? D.B. Cooper. Number 4. Lost loot. In February of 1980, as I mentioned before, a few months shy of a decade since the caper had been done, some bundled money was found near Vancouver, Washington. Naturally, they had degraded over time because, well, it's paper money and water and just makes sense. The vending machine wasn't going to accept them, but after some thorough investigation, it was confirmed that the money did in fact belong to the stash that he stole. It seems though that this brought up more questions than answers. How did the bills end up on the riverbank? When did they wash up? Why did they wash up? How did they wash up? And why did one of the 3 stacks only have 90 bills instead of 100 like the other stacks? That doesn't make any sense. What? In better news though, the kid who stumbled across the money got to keep it and in 2008 sold it at auction for a small fortune of his own. So there's some good news. I like that. That's good news. We like that. Number 3, copycats. This happens with a lot of capers, crimes, or well, just craziness in general. Crazy makes crazy. In the D.B. Cooper case, it made a lot of crazy. In 1972 alone, 15 copycat attempts were made, and some of them were more successful than you might think, or at least hope to. The most unusual was done by a man named Frank Manahan. In 1972, Frank took over a plane from Pennsylvania and asked for $303,000, cigarettes, food, parachutes, knives, and a helmet, because yeah, that's what you need. When they landed, he let everyone off except for 6 crew members, and when he was given his cash, decided that 100 bills simply wasn't a large enough denomination, and demanded the pilot fly back up. Sure, okay, eventually he jumped out of the plane, just like D.B. Cooper did, except he was over the Honduras jungle. It didn't go very well, because he turned himself in after weeks on the run in the jungle, so, you know, maybe pick Washington's a little bit better in the jungle, I guess, you know? I don't know. Number 2, security. After the files for people stealing money and jumping out of airplanes started piling up on the FBI's desk, it was clear that things needed to change. I mean, come on, 15 cases in 1 year? It's a little much. So in 1973, bag checks and security were done for the first time in airports across America. Hard to ever imagine an airport without them, really. Airplanes were built much more securely and peepholes were added, so you could see what was going on between the cabin and the main area. Most importantly, I think, is now that you can't open airplane doors on passenger aircraft whilst it is in the air, mainly because of the D.B. Cooper incident. So, in case you try to go for a little fly zone, you can't do it. Can't do it, dude, because of him. Sorry, man, he ruined it for you. Number 1, still alive. Sort of. Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam vet who was arrested in 1978 for trying to fake his own death and a subject of a book that highlights his aerial escapes. Not to mention his uncanny likeness to be D.B. Cooper, well, he was thought to actually be D.B. Cooper. All these clues certainly had the FBI intrigued, but even with his confession of being D.B. Cooper, they still weren't convinced. It's just really too hard to tell. Robert passed away in 2019, so I guess we'll just never know. He confessed to it, but he didn't, you know, we need 2 confessions to put someone away. That's how it works nowadays. You need 2. Number 10, Roanoke Colony. 1585 Roanoke Island. The first English colony tries their hardest to establish a base for English operations in the New World. Can you imagine what that must have been like to discover all these lands and then encounter the tribes of the Americas? That must have been something. Things were great until they realized more was needed. Supplies, colonists, and, well, all the things you need to make an early American settlement. Gotta love it. So a ship was sent back to England to restock. However, when they returned, the colony had all but vanished. There was barely a trace of the colonists. All that was left was a carving in the tree that read Croatoan, whatever that means. Well, that's scary enough for me to Croatoan the heck out of here. Number 9, D.B. Cooper. This is the alias given to an unknown man who woke up one morning and decided to be James Bond. I wish I could be James Bond. Yeah, okay, sure. It's a very strange story. In November of 1971, an airplane was flying from Oregon to Seattle, as they do. This is when our main character here decided to pull a Tommy Vercetti, a Carl Johnson, or a Nico Bellic and appropriate the vehicle for himself. He then managed to ransom $200,000 cash, which I don't know who's carrying that much cash in a plane, but okay, and that would be over the 1 million mark today for you inflation enthusiasts. Then, like a true nutcase, jumped out of the plane and parachuted to safety, finger quote. To this day, we have no idea who D.B. Cooper was. All we know is that some of the ransom money was found in a river a few years later in 1980, which did spark new interest, but not a lot of leads. And and that when he bought the airline ticket, it was purchased with cash under the name Dan Cooper. It's suspected that he didn't make the jump, but we just don't know. That's crazy. What a weird story. Number 8, Alcatraz escapees. Nobody gets off the rock. Unless, of course, you're trying to get to Toronto or something. That's a little Newfie humor for you, because we call it the Rock. I don't know why it's cute. Alcatraz, super prison built in the middle of San Francisco Bay to house the country's worst criminals, like Al Capone. Crazy guy. It was a tough place and thought to be inescapable. John Anglin, Clarence Anglin, and France Morris didn't like that idea, so in a total Hollywood-esque escape attempt, they tried, unscrewing vents, constructed makeshift boats from raincoats, life jackets, oars, and all with plumber's glue. Very crazy stuff, very Mythbusters, if you will. And even the classic paper mache dummy to throw off the guards. I love the ingenuity. On the evening of June 11th, 1962, they made their escape, and well, yeah, they did it, proving anything is possible, even escaping from a maximum security prison in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Crazy. Thing is, they went missing afterwards, and not the kind that the convicts do when they escape jail, but the same kind of missing when your picture's on the side of a milk carton. Not the good kind of missing. To this day, we do not know what became of the boys who escaped the worst prison on earth. No one's sure. Number 7, Amelia Earhart. What a woman! She was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, a role model not only to young pilots everywhere, but also to many young women who wish to have the courage and bravery she showed off every day. She had broken many records and was most likely going to break a lot more, probably a lot more. That's just what she was going to do in July of 1937, except she and her flying partner disappeared. What? Yeah, it's crazy. Seemingly into thin air. A lack of radio communication, and well, nothing was ever recovered. No plane, no Amelia. There's a bunch of running theories on what happened to them. However, my favorite is that the Japanese Empire might have done her in. Perhaps thinking she was a spy plane and didn't want the rest of the world to see, well, what Imperial Japan was up to in the Pacific at the time, which it wasn't good. Also, my grandfather talks about this and he says he thinks that's what happened. So the man's been around for a long time. He's been around for 90 years. The guy knows what he's talking about, so we're gonna go with that. Number 6, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. Here's one I actually remember. I was actually alive to witness this one. Okay, so I shouldn't sound so proud about that, should I? No, anyway. Okay, so back in March of 2014, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 disappeared. Took off, headed to Beijing, never made it to Beijing. Oh no, said everyone. Planes are supposed to land after they take off. Yes, that's very true. It was presumed that all 300 passengers and crew were lost. So the most expensive investigation in aviation history was underway. Searching the South China Sea, but with not much results. Almost nothing, actually. Their best evidence came not too long after when Malaysian Airlines 17 was brought down by missiles over eastern Ukraine. So the same airline in the same part of the world that's not so free and democratic, well, you can put the pieces together. Still, no one knows for sure what happened to the plane. Ugh. Number 5, Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa. Where would the truck drivers across America be if it weren't for the gentleman Jimmy? Probably wealthier, actually, probably wealthier. Your side, my side, your side. Okay, anyway, let me see The Irishman. It's a great movie. For those that don't know or haven't seen The Irishman, Jimmy Hoffa was in charge of the Teamsters Union. More importantly, he was in charge of their finances, their fund. Ooh. Jimmy also had some friends in a certain organization that, let's say, Tony Soprano and Paulie Walnuts belonged to. These Tony Soprano-like characters would go to Jimmy and get loans for their criminal enterprises, mainly new casinos in the beautiful Las Vegas. I'm coming, Vegas. I want to see you so bad. Oh, and interest, of course. You wouldn't loan out money to gangsters without interest. He made a lot of money, too. Well, after being arrested for fraud and losing his union, Jimmy just wouldn't shut up, as they say. And that's really the worst thing you can do around that particular group of Italian Americans. That and put ketchup on your spaghetti. Also, I just want to side note, in Goodfellas, when they're eating dinner, Robert De Niro puts ketchup on a spaghetti. That's wrong. You shouldn't put ketchup on your spaghetti. One day in the 1970s, Jimmy Hoffa disappeared one day before meeting with some goons at a restaurant. And he's been missing ever since. Some people think he's buried under Giant Stadium, some people think he's in a river. We'll never know. We'll just never know. Number 4, crew of the Mary Celeste. Here's one of the greatest nautical mysteries ever. That, and where my rubber ducky goes when I sit down in the bathtub. I sit down and it disappears. I don't know where it goes. Now, we've all heard about the ghost ships. Some pirates are just so attached to their vessels that they come with them between the ethereal planes. Arr, I love me boat, sir. I don't know. Makes sense, sure. What does not make any sense is what happened to the Celeste in 1872. The ship was found floating in the water. The ship was in good condition, the cargo was still there, tools, everything that, well, a ship would need, except the crew. There was not one person on the boat, and nobody was ever found afterwards, and nobody knows what happened to them. That's creepy, that's weird. It's when there's no evidence, that's when I don't go. That's ghost, and I don't go. Number 3, Ambrose Bierce. Ambrose Bierce was a journalist in the 1800s, and as history tells us, not such a pleasant man. He had a sour demeanor, if you will. If you knew there was a very violent and bloody rebellion happening in Mexico, what would you guys do at home? Stay at home, or go to witness such events for your journalism and out of boredom? I know someone in the comments is going to say, yeah, I'd go, I'm pretty bored, I'd go. Well, don't, it's bad, don't do it. Well, Ambrose did go, but it wasn't too long after he was there that he sent a correspondence back home saying his next adventure was to be in a place that was unknown to him. He never wrote back again and was never seen again. Some think he manually checked out, while others think the conflict may have had something to do with it. The lesson here, stay home. That's it. Simple. Sit in your chair, watch Bumblebee. You watch me, we'll hang out. It's a good time. It's easy, it's simple. Number 2, Naomi Uemura. A man from Japan with an adventurous plan. I mean, this guy had done it all, seriously. He went to the North Pole, he took a boat down the Amazon, he was a real adventurer. Best I've ever done is whitewater rafting, which is pretty adrenaline fueled. It's pretty fun, I definitely recommend it. So in 1984, he was going to scale the Denali Mountains, which are the largest in North America. Didn't know that. He was reported to make it to the top, but he never made it back down to base camp. After missing for some time, there was still no rescue team, as this is the stupidest thing I've heard all week. They didn't want to rescue him because they thought it would offend him by coming to rescue him. That's so stupid. You could have saved his life. Most of his gear was recovered at 17,000 feet. However, he was not, and to this day he has not been recovered. Number 1, Dyatlov Pass incident. You take some Russians, you put them on an expedition, and you throw them out in the Ural wilderness. What could go wrong? How about one of the weirdest cases in history? This expedition was being headed by 9 experienced Soviet trekkers and could handle pretty much anything. Russians know winter. They do love their winter. They know how to handle it. One night in 1959, they went radio silent. When others were sent out to check them the next day, they were found just not living. Tents were cut open, they were wearing inside clothes. 3 of the 9 men had severe physical trauma, 1 with a crushed skull. So the disappearance here really is, what was the beast or monster that got them and then disappeared? Where is the monster? If that thing's still out there, I ain't going. That's scary. Number 10, Atlantis, the poster boy for lost cities and the name given to many gentlemen's clubs across the world. Yes, the lost city of Atlantis always comes to mind when talking of ancient cities. I mean, how could it not? A beautiful ancient Greek port city with straits surrounding an island, or at least this is how it was described by our boy Plato, and pretty much everything we know about the sunken city comes from him. Was it really a wonder of the ancient world? Was it really anything like he describes it? Or anyone describes it for that matter? Maybe, but we're not even sure. We're not even sure if it really existed beyond Plato's writings, to be honest. There have been some evidence to suggest that a city of its likeness existed near Spain, but calling that concrete proof is like saying I never once had a beer in my life. It would be beyond me and the boys to crack open some cold ones. I've never done that. And I'm definitely not gonna do that this weekend. You guys wanna have some beers or what? Number 9, Troy. Remember when Brad Pitt was Brad Pitt? I know, right? I don't know what it is, but he's just not the same dude anymore. Maybe he got old, I don't know. The ancient city of Troy, besides being portrayed in the 2004 summer blockbuster, is famous for its legendary war, featuring Troy's least favorite equine guest, the Trojan horse. If we're to believe what Hollywood says about history, and why not, they never get it wrong, the Trojans were having an issue breaking down the walls of Troy. Had some good walls. That's a nice wall, you know, good walls. I don't know. They had some good walls, so to get through that, they built a giant rocking horse on wheels because That's a very comforting gift to give someone, right? Who doesn't love a rocking horse? It's a little creepy. But little did the people of Troy know that there was Trojans hiding inside. Hence the Trojan horse was born. Or the act of doing a Trojan horse, if that makes sense. Whatever it was a slaughter, and this may have something to do with the city's disappearance. I don't know. Maybe it was Brad Pitt. Maybe it was Orlando Bloom. He was in that movie, and there was another guy in that movie, I think. It's an okay movie. I don't know. Orlando Bloom's kind of cute. I don't know. We'll see. Number 8. Mesa Verde. The Mesa Verde cave dwellings are a sight to behold. Given for its age and the remnants of the Pueblo civilization, they are well preserved. Structures and houses that are dug into the cave dwellings in southwest Colorado. This is one I actually didn't know about. So today, I'm having fun and learning. Something my grade 11 English teacher was all about. Shout out to Miss Middleton, you're the best. I miss you, you're the best. Sadly for the people living in the caves of Mesa Verde, they did not have such a cool teacher to tell them what's up. Because if they did, they probably would have been more careful. As a serious drought, lack of prey, and a good old-fashioned sickness pretty much wiped them out. Yeah, no good. But no one is 100% sure what happened. What we do know, however, is that they left some sweet structures behind. Cowboys looted the place when it was rediscovered in the 1800s, and Miss Middleton was one of the only teachers to let me be me in class. And that's just awesome, so thank you. And the cowboy, people want to see more cowboy. You're alright, partner. Number 7, Pompeii. Oy vey, this is a bad one. Pompeii, one of the crowning jewels of the cities that made up the Roman Empire, and truth be told, it's on my travel list. Always wanted to go there. You got Romans, you got togas, and you got one of the worst, if not the worst, natural disaster of the ancient world. Imagine being the guy who finds a skeleton under fossilized volcanic ash, which for most people working in that line of work would say that's a good day. But imagine how those guys felt when they found the whole lost city of Pompeii underneath all that volcanic ash. Great success, as the story goes. People were chilling in Pompeii. The Mediterranean paradise that it was completely cut off guard when Mount Vesuvius bited all its liquid hot magma and busted an eruption so bad it destroyed the city within a short amount of time, covering the people in hot ash that must have felt like the mud bath from hell. Literally. There's still yet more to be discovered. I think they found like a restaurant or something and there was like some still paint on the walls. It was pretty cool stuff. Number 6, Petra. Red Rose City, as it's called. Petra is an ancient city located in Jordan's southwest desert, and most of you probably know it because of Indiana Jones. I know, it's okay, me too. I'm not gonna pretend I actually know everything. That's the best Indiana movie, no cap. You may also know it from Civilization games. I was never a fan of settling cities in the desert. Not enough resources for me. Pop culture references aside, Petra is a beautiful piece of history from the ancient world. Despite being full of sand, Petra shows evidence of a great water conduit system, which you kinda need since you are in the desert. It was thought to have been completed around 312 BC and rediscovered in the 1800s. Not by cowboys though, different people this time. I gotta say though, it must be a great feeling to discover a place of lost history like that. And it weren't no cowboys, it would have been British. It would have been, oh, right, and what's that? Something like that, I don't know. Number 5, Thebes. One of the most successful ancient cities in Egypt. At first, she was a great place to be, and at one point was estimated to have a population of 40,000, making it one of the largest. Thebes was built like many other cities in Egypt, close to the Nile River. Almost like that river was important or something. Naturally, since the city was a pinnacle of civilization, it made it a target for many other factions and issues, internal and external. The arrival of Greco-Roman rule doesn't help either. Eventually, the city deflated over time, including its economy, which for us humans is a big one. What, no money? I'm out of here! Number 4, Alexandria. Now this is one city I would have loved to see in its prime. Founded by the Greeks during their conquest, specifically Alexander the Great, it became one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. The lighthouse alone earns it a spot on this list, but some would argue the Library of Alexandria is much more important. My dyslexia disagrees, but my heart full of love and history tends to agree. A building containing this much knowledge is a very valuable thing to have, especially all those years ago. Thousands of scrolls were stored in the library. Archimedes himself may have invented his hand pump while studying at the library. Pretty cool. Well, where is it? What happened to it? Come on, Chad, tell us. Okay, hold on. As the legend goes, one Julius Caesar burned down some Egyptian boats that were chilling in the docks. And if you guys know fire, then you know it likes to jump from other things to burn. And it did. And now the library's gone. And now I'm here talking about it. Number 3, Babylon. Okay, I take back what I said. I would have loved to see the city of Babylon in its prime. Being that this city pre-exists a lot of the Egyptian cities, makes sense as to why it ain't there no more. It was humanity's first crack at civilization. we did okay there for a minute. Famous for King Hammurabi and his code of laws, which every first-year law students know at the top of their heads. There will be a test, guys, so be prepared. And of course, the mythical Hanging Gardens of Babylon. This is another one we aren't sure if it was there or not, but my biggest defense for the Hanging Gardens is the pyramids. Any expert will tell you how complex they are, so to me it doesn't seem that impossible. Years and years of regime changes and external factors made Babylon go bye-bye. It's not there anymore, you can't go there, it's not there, you not find it, you find something else there. There's another guy there now, you never find it. Number 2, El Dorado. Dios mío, toda el oro. But yes, that's right, my Spanish-speaking friends, the lost city of gold, El Dorado. Well, maybe, it might not have actually existed either, but given the mouth-watering hunger the Spanish had for North American gold, they were willing to believe anything, including rumors of a city made from untouched riches. Plus, the other European nations hadn't got there yet, so this meant chalk one up for Spain. If they could find it, which they never did, because again, it probably didn't exist, so technically we lost this city quickly because it might not have existed, and they needed the gold, and Spain did some stuff. Number 1, Machu Picchu. I choose you, Machu Picchu! I'm sorry, that was bad pun. I gotta make a clean joke every once in a while. You never know, someone might find it cute. We'll see. Speaking of cute and bad segues, we don't know much about Machu Picchu. There's just no written language to help us discover, well, what was going on there. What is going on here? Machu Picchu. Anyway, another bad joke. However, there is some speculation that it was built for a king, or the boss, or something. I'll add to that by saying that I've played enough video games to know that the bad guys, bosses, and kings always build their lairs to the top of stuff. Maybe to be closer to the gods. Maybe it was the view. Or real estate value. I'll never know. But whatever the reason, it was abandoned shortly after the Spanish showed up to Eurify the area.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Roanoke Island, North Carolina. Just off the coast of what is now North Carolina, back in August 1587, around 100 English settlers arrived to Roanoke Island. John White, governor of the new colony, had to sail back to England to grab supplies. But while he was away, a naval war broke out between England and Spain, so his commute was delayed just a tad, you know. He got back 3 years later in 1590 with said supplies. He's like, hey, sorry I'm late, we got some naval war traffic, you know how it is. Upon arrival, however, nobody was there anymore, including his wife, daughter, granddaughter, anybody. Among the 100 or so inhabitants, they all vanished. The only hint as to where they went or what even happened was the words Croatoan and Crow carved into a wooden post, and CRO on a tree. Now Croatoan or Croatoan was the name of the Native American tribe that lived on the island as well. But after looking for evidence, theories, even archaeological exploration, experts still can't figure this one out. I've actually been to this island back when I was 16, so this one really creeped me out, not gonna lie. That's why I wanted to start with this one. Number 9, the Mississippians. We'll dial back the calendar to 700 CE. Now at this point, before European colonization, the American Southeast was home to the Mississippians. Their main area was the city called Cahokia, which is now modern-day Collinsville, Illinois. It's not large either, it's just 6 square miles. Check out this photo of Monk's Mound, a now historic site. We look at ancient Egyptians and our jaws drop at the sight of those pyramids, plus their alignment with the stars, it's all naturally fascinating. Well, Cahokia was once home to pyramids and large wooden structures as well. We're not exactly sure what happened to this 40,000 person civilization, but experts guess famine and disease. Number 8, Catalhoyuk. Another ancient city, another ancient mystery. This time we're looking at what's currently south-central Turkey. About 9,000 years ago, it looked a lot different. Catalhoyuk was popping off until 7,000 years ago, but again, we have no clue what really happened. The most interesting tidbit of history here is the way that this ancient civilization built their homes. They made houses side by side, really close together, and as fitting as it is for this channel, you would say it was almost like a hive-like system. They didn't have doors, they didn't have mail slots or welcome mats. Instead, they had holes on their roofs. That's how they got in and out every day. So yeah, they would use ladders to get in and out, which I gotta say, sounds pretty exhausting. They're probably all pretty ripped. Number 7, Mayans. One of the most advanced civilizations on this list, the Maya, were somehow able to create these massive stone structures in the middle of southern Mexico jungles. Next to the Egyptian pyramids, I'd say these are almost just as popular at this point. One of the most interesting pieces of the Maya, I'm sure as we all recall, was their calendar and the way that they worked it. I mean, we made a movie about 2012. The news was talking about 2012. Literally 12 years after Y2K, we're like, what if it happens again? Like, you know, this time it seems serious. It's not gonna happen. We're good for now. We're gonna probably end ourselves before a calendar or a movie does. The Yucatan jungles are filled with pyramids and beautiful complex monuments lost in time, but where did the builders go and why did they leave? Well, a couple scientists analyzed rock samples around these areas and they were able to study the water levels in nearby lakes, suggesting that the reason the Mayans disappeared were not aliens, but rather they collapsed because of a drought. That checks out. Aliens are cool, and the calendar stuff's cool, but no, they're just drought. Number 6, Gobekli Tepe. Just 6 miles from the ancient Turkey city Urfa, Gobekli Tepe is 100,000 years old. They are these massive stone circles created by a civilization that predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. Yeah, it's nuts. We're convinced it's the world's oldest temple, a holy temple rather. Because this area in the world, now it may not be a spectacle, but thousands of years ago, you would be able to see the horizon in every single direction. Herds of beautiful animals racing by, fields of barley and wheat. It would have looked like a temple from Legend of Zelda. Masterpiece. It was actually first discovered back in the 1960s by university anthropologists. They were doing a survey of the region, found this place, and assumed it was an ancient cemetery and then nothing more, and then continued on their merry way. Now cut to 1994, best year ever. Klaus Schmidt was doing surveys for himself, found the same site, and knew right away from the first glance that this was man-made and there was much, much more to it. Number 5, Clovis. We're taking a look at some mammoth hunters for this next point. This civilization is considered the first inhabitants of the New World. Hunters would use what's called Clovis points to get their next meal. They would use chipped flint. Now they had to hunt bison, mammoths, deer, anything that had skin to use for shelter, but also clothing. In fact, this 10,000-year-old civilization may have disappeared at the same time as mammoths. After all, with these historical beasts acting as both your gear and your food, the Ice Age ought to do some damage. Number 4, Anasazi. Before the first skyscrapers were built in the 1800s, the Anasazi built massive stone buildings as well on the sides of cliffs back in the 12th century. Some of these walls, by the way, housed up to hundreds of residents. They were huge. What's now present-day Mesa Verde National Park was pretty intense back in those days. Scientists have uncovered some hints as to where these creative cliff builders disappeared to. Well, violence. Yeah, the thing that's still going strong today, thousands of years later, see back in the 12th century United States, long-term drought led the Anasazi to violence and perhaps they just wiped each other out. Other theories suggest that the Anasazi had to abandon their massive homes around the 1300s and then travel south. Either or. Number 3, Easter Islanders. Back between 300 and 1200 AD, Polynesians used canoes, not carnival cruise ships, but canoes, like little canoes, and then somehow traveled all the way to Easter Island over 2,000 miles away from Chile. That feat in itself is impressive. When you start to really think about the Easter Island heads on that island, it gets even more impressive. The Easter Island Moai statues, keep in mind there were hundreds of them at one point, reached up to 32 feet high and weighed over 82 tons. It was a sight to see until the 1800s, because that's when the civilization vanished. But what happened? Well, many of these statues were destroyed during this time as well, so history doesn't really tell us much. The population was decreased drastically and the island higher-ups, be it priests or chiefs, were all overthrown. Well, what happened to them may give us some ideas for the future. See, Easter Islanders cut down so many trees that before those seeds could enter the earth again, rats ate them all. These guys ran out of trees, which means they ran out of rope or the ability to make more canoes. So naturally, a civil war began, everyone was freaking out, plus starvation. Also plus the arrival of Europeans in 1722, they immediately wiped out most of the remaining Easter Islanders. Then around the 1800s, waves of smallpox reduced the amount of island natives to just 100. Number 2, Vikings. I'm a big Assassin's Creed fan, and when they announced Vikings as their newest installment, I was so excited. I'm a big Norse mythology fan, but what actually happened to Greenland Vikings? There's a huge mystery around them. Well, around 985 AD, Eric the Red arrived with large fleet to colonize the island, and of course was subsequently banished for manslaughter. Yeah. So now we have 2 colonies on Greenland, a large eastern colony and a smaller western one. Now these Vikings didn't build massive pyramids, but instead they built stone churches that still stand to this day. These Vikings were around for a few hundred years, and at one point in time there were 5,000 Vikings or so. That's incredible, that's a lot of Vikings. But later on in 1721, a missionary expedition arrived and there were not 5,000 Vikings, in fact there were 0 Vikings. Archaeologists did the digging and apparently the western settlement died off around 1400 AD, and just decades later the eastern settlement was, well, simply abandoned. And there's also a handful of family fun movies that hint at what happened to them as well. The Ice Age, well, the small one in the 14th century, but still an ice age nonetheless. Number 1, the Indus River Valley Civilization. What's now modern Pakistan was one of the world's earliest societies. Also referred to as the Harappan civilization or the Indus, were actually quite large. We're talking about Vikings in the thousands, but the Indus reached about 5 million. Aside from the other earliest civilizations, be it Egyptians and the Mesopotamians, they were considered the most extensive. The world's first ever dentist came from the Indus Valley, so thank you. Something way more interesting though than dentist facts is that when compared to Egyptian ancient cultures, the Indus never built any palaces or temples, meaning there were no priests or kings. But we still get to study ancient texts, those are always fun and confusing. The Indus had a language that we're slowly but surely decoding today, but even so there's still around 250 to 500 characters that remain a mystery.
Number 10, the SSL Pharaoh. 15,000 feet below the surface of the Bermuda Triangle sits the SSL Pharaoh, a 790-foot-long cargo ship. The story is tragic, but the mystery of where its crew ended up remains a mystery to this day. Did they succumb to the elements or something else? In September 2015, the Pharaoh was set to pass right through the Bermuda Triangle while traveling from Florida to Puerto Rico. The ship was carrying 33 people in total. A tropical storm was brewing, but it was hundreds of miles away from the actual ship's route, and the cargo ship was built to withstand this kind of weather, even if it did. But Mother Nature had other plans, and the storm transformed into a Category 3 hurricane with waves 40 feet high. The last message received from the ship said that the engine failed along with the power and that the entire ship had tilted on its side, but the crew had managed to contain the flooding and that things were for the most part under control. But that was the last message they received until a few weeks later when the El Pharaoh was found sitting upright in Davy Jones' locker. Debris was everywhere, but there wasn't a single sign of the crew, their bodies nowhere to be seen. Number 9, the USS Cyclops. It's such a shame this ship had to go down carrying such an epic name. It was World War I, and Lieutenant G.W. Worley was sent on the dangerous task of carrying coal to Brazil to refuel Allied ships. With 309 people on board, the ship did reach Barbados in March, but after that, nothing. The USS Cyclops was never heard from again. The Navy's official statement reads, "The disappearance of this ship has been one of the most baffling mysteries in the annals of the Navy, all attempts to locate her having proved unsuccessful." There were no enemy submarines in the Western Atlantic at that time, and in December 1918, every effort was made to obtain from German sources information regarding the disappearance of this vessel. How do 309 people in a massive ship go missing without a trace? One secret the Bermuda Triangle aims to keep. Number 8, Flight 19. The year 1945. On December 5th, 5 Avenger torpedo bombs, I know I got excited too, but unfortunately unrelated to Marvel, under the command of Lieutenant Charles Taylor from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, set out with 13 student pilots. Guess what happened? They disappeared. But it got super weird before they did. About an hour and a half into the flight, Taylor radioed that something was going wrong with their compasses, that they weren't working. He thought they were over the Florida Keys and so was told to head north, but Taylor got confused and the team kept heading out to sea. Night fell, and before long all communication with the 13 petered out and the entire crew disappeared without a trace. To this day, the planes have never been recovered and remained trapped beneath the waves of the Bermuda Triangle. Number 7, Piper Navajo. The temperatures were ideal. The sky was clear, it was warm, there really shouldn't have been a problem, but for Irving Rivers, the secret of what happened to him that day will remain with him wherever he is. On November 3rd, 1978, Rivers left St. Croix, one of the US Virgin Islands, in his plane called the Piper Navajo. He was piloting for Eastern Caribbean Airways and was an extremely experienced pilot. While making a solo flight to pick up passengers, the control tower operator told him to avoid a spot of showers and Rivers made the adjustment. This is where it gets weird. The controller saw the lights of his plane and cleared him for landing, like he saw them glowing in the sky. But soon after another plane departed, Rivers' lights completely disappeared. The red and green lights he saw blinking before were nowhere in sight, and even stranger, his plane disappeared on the radar. An emergency search went out, but nothing. They found absolutely nothing. This dude's plane literally disappeared 1.6 kilometers from landing, and nothing, no trace, no debris, nothing was found. Number 6, the Witchcraft. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of magic involved with the Bermuda Triangle, but Witchcraft was actually the name of the ship. On December 22nd, a 23-foot-long luxury yacht crewed by two gentlemen, Dan Barak and Father Patrick Horgan, went out to enjoy a dazzling Christmas view of Miami. But then a mile offshore, the yacht radioed that they'd hit something, but there didn't appear to be damage. They asked to be towed ashore anyway, and the Coast Guard set out immediately. It took them 20 minutes to reach the site, but when they got there was nothing. They knew that aboard the craft there were tons of flares, life vests, lifeboats, and distress signal devices, including a special design installed by Barak. He put an extra flotation device designed in such a way that even if the hull was ruptured, a part of the ship would still be able to float. But there was no sign that the ship had even been there. They searched 1,200 square miles, but still, nothing. Number 5. The mystery of the derelict. The Ellen Austin was a white oak schooner that was sailing from New York to London in 1881, but a discovery they made during their voyage stopped them in their tracks. A derelict ship was seen floating aimlessly near the Bermuda Triangle. Captain Baker, captain of the Ellen, waited 2 days before approaching it, just in case it was a trap. When he hopped aboard, he found no sign of any crew, though it was well packed and fully stocked. In order to tow it back, the captain placed a crew on the ship so they could sail it back together. But as they tried to do just that, a storm hit, separating them. After it cleared, Baker saw the ship drifting once again and chased it down. But just like how he'd found it, the ship was entirely crewless. Not a sign of the men he had placed on there was found. They abandoned the ship, fearing that whatever was on it was cursed. Number 4. The ghost ship of the Outer Banks. If you love that show, I know what you thought of. To earn a name like that, something crazy must have happened, and that it did. A massive schooner known as the Carroll A. Deering was discovered completely abandoned by the Coast Guard and has ghost story written all over it. While returning from Hampton Roads, Virginia, from Barbados on January 29, 1921, she passed the Cape Lookout lightship. The officer reported that the crew seemed disorganized and confused, but the crew reported that they had lost their anchors. The last time the ship would be seen was by another ship, the SS Lake Elon, who said the Deering looked like it was heading a weird direction. At 6:30 a.m. on January 31st, the ship was seen run aground on the shoals with the decks awash, sails set, lifeboats missing, and therefore seemingly abandoned. But all personal belongings were left behind, including navigational equipment, crucial papers, and there was indeed no anchor on the ship. The weirdest thing though was the food laid out as if someone was in the middle of preparing food. Rumors of rum running and even pirates surrounding the wreckage, but no one has ever solved the mystery of their disappearance. Number 3. Star Tiger. The Star Tiger was supposed to arrive at 5 a.m. in Bermuda, but as you can guess, that never happened. In fact, this would be the last flight it would ever take. Captain B.W. McMillan was flying with World War II hero Air Marshal Sir Arthur Conyngham on January 30th, 1948 from England to Bermuda. The Star Tiger was a British South American Airways Tudor 4 plane. Official records state that the aircraft's heater was unreliable and may have failed, or that the compass was at fault. But as for what actually happened, that must lie with whatever natural anomalies surrounded that area. McMillan decided to fly at around 2,000 feet, which is pretty low, but he was trying to avoid the strong wind due to the Gulf Stream in the area. The last time they reported their position was at 3:15 a.m. and they were on track to arrive at 5 a.m. but they never showed up. Now, flying so low meant they would have little room to maneuver and burn fuel faster, so perhaps it was due to natural events that something happened, but when it comes to the Bermuda Triangle, who can be sure? Number 2. The Star Ariel. Similar to the Star Tiger, the Star Ariel was another Tudor 4 model and a part of the British South American Airways. It was after this flight, however, that the model was discontinued. It left Heathrow Airport for the first time in 1946 with 7 crew members and 13 passengers en route to Jamaica. They were just going on holiday. People just looking for a good time. Captain J.C. McPhee reported in that things were going smoothly. So far so good. But then a cryptic message arrived where the captain said he was changing his frequency and then the sound cut out. Nothing was heard after that. When the craft didn't arrive, a search party was sent out, but not even a hint of debris or wreckage was ever found. With 2 of these aircraft disappearing in such a mysterious way, it's no wonder they got rid of the Tudor 4. With so much bad luck, clearly might have been cursed. Number 1, last but not least, the Teignmouth Electron. What can money, an aggressive PR assistant, and a boat buy you? Well, for Donald Crowhurst, he thought it would crown him a winner of the Sunday Times Golden Globe race, an event that required each contestant to sail around the world alone. Thing is, He was pretty new to sailing, but with a substantially large financial backer, Crowhurst had a lot riding on this adventure. He set sail from London on October 3rd, 1968, but almost turned back after his boat started having some problems. He decided to man a trimaran. Unfortunately, it was poorly built and the new improvements Crowhurst made fell apart like paper in water. But nevertheless, he kept calm and carried on, even reporting to his publicist that he was having a grand old time. Thing is, he never left the Atlantic. This is his route compared to the others. On his return, he feared that his deceptions would be revealed, so he jumped ship. His ship, the Electron, was abandoned in the Bermuda Triangle in July 1969, and many suspect that the unusual energy of the area is what drew the man to madness.
Number 10. Romanov eggs. The Romanov dynasty ruled over the Empire of Russia for 300 years. 300 years of breakfast being served in the Winter Palace, and 300 years of ignoring the peasants even after they make an attempt on your life. Peasants. Well, eventually this caught up with the royal family, and the people and the workers revolted. They were pretty upset. It was Soviet time! Nicholas II was forced to abdicate his throne and power and went into exile with his family. Now, since the old government was out and, well, it was time to let in the new one, That's a bad joke. Some resources were allocated to the new governing body. Makes sense. And perhaps maybe some family treasures also may have gone missing. We totally didn't take, communists would never take money. What? The Romanov Fabergé eggs, for instance, jewel and gold encrusted decorative eggs, the same that are probably in Nona's basement. However, these would have been worth a fortune. It's too bad they're missing. What a shame. We'll never know. Beautiful, just beautiful eggs, gold and jewels, fabulous. Number 9, Ark of the Covenant. It belongs in a museum. And if you see Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, then you know it's chilling in a top secret military storage unit. Besides the whole atomic fridge scene, I actually think that movie's okay. I really do. The monkey swinging thing's a little weird with Shia LaBeouf, but I think it's okay. Well, in Raiders, Indy is after the Ark of the Covenant, or at least he tries to go after the Ark of the Covenant and put it in a museum. So stupid. The Germans kind of get there first, and even without Indy to save the day, the Germans, well, they botch it. I know that if you watched that scene when you were younger, it gave you nightmares. Don't lie, I know it did. Well, to put it simply, the Ark is a shiny gold box that may or may not contain what's left of the 10 Commandments. That's right, the same ones that Moses walked down the mountain, Charlton Heston, and these are the commandments of God. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen the movie. It's a long movie, 4 hours. However, it's only meant for the eyes of those who are worthy, because if not, 80s CGI ghosts will come out and melt your face. Like in the movie. Number 8, Montezuma's Treasure. The Aztecs were an amazing civilization in Mesoamerica who built grand cities with canals and boats for travel. Pretty smart, all considering they never invented the wheel. It's kind of weird. They never did. It's strange. They also happened to fancy a bit of treasure, and by that I mean they loved gold. The smell of it, the texture of it, the taste of it. I love gold! Austin Powers, anyone? Chris liked it. He liked that part. Everything was great until the Spanish showed up and introduced blam blams, germs, and steel, as the Europeans do. The Spanish were after the Aztec treasure, and truth be told, they got a fair share of it too. However, King Montezuma had his own wealth, and it's said to be a fortune, which makes he's the king. He's probably got a lot of gold. It makes sense. However, during an attack on the capital city, he was de-lifed, and his treasure buried somewhere that's never been found. Ooh, boy, you'd find a lot of good stuff in that pile. However, it may also be cursed, so I wouldn't exactly want to go looking. You'd end up with traveler's diarrhea or something. Montezuma's revenge, baby. Ooh. Number 7, German gold. 1940s Germany. They went on a world tour and they came out pretty strong, honestly, pretty strong. However, after the international community decided that goose-stepping home from the coffee shop wasn't ideal, they sent Germany packing. However, during their rise to power, Germany was allocating resources for their future trips. Part of this was stealing gold, treasure, and art, and pretty much anything of value and bringing it back home to fund the war effort. from pretty much anyone they could get their hands on. Ugh. So, after the war ended, all stolen loot was given back to the rightful owners, right? Of course it was. No, it wasn't, because this is real life. While some was recovered, many accounted items are still unaccounted for. It's way too much to even talk about, honestly, it's crazy. And for some of the stuff may also be sitting in a Swiss bank vault still, so that's kinda shady. Swiss bank, uh-oh. Number 6. Mosby's treasure. A Confederate colonel found himself in possession of gold, silver, and valuable family heirlooms. Totally didn't rob all the people in the area to get that though. What? No. Well, while transporting his totally not ill-gotten gains, it was rumored that a Union patrol was nearby. In fear of being caught and slowed down by all of his loot, Colonel Mosby decided to bury his treasure between 2 pine trees, marked with his knife. That's how you know it's always going to be there. After falling back to Confederate lines, he sent out a patrol to retrieve it. The patrol got by Union soldiers, and Mosby never returned. So anyone near Fairfax, Virginia, you may be standing on top of a lot of Civil War treasure. Number 5. Hojo Masamune. Master sword maker and legendary smith. His sword was passed down through generations. The craftsmanship, the history, and the fact that katanas are just cool. Ask anyone at Anime North, they'll tell you, they're all very cool. Well, it was still around in the 1940s, however, while the international community was explaining to Germany how big of a mistake they made, America was giving Japan a spank on the bum. After 1945, America had occupied Japan, as it is normal to do after a war. However, that meant the Japanese forces and civilians had to be disarmed. It was kind of a touchy subject and kind of a tough time, but it had to be done. That means no blam blams and no ceremonial poking sticks. The issue is America wasn't keeping these. I mean, they did keep some, but they were more so destroying things, and it is speculated that in the confusion that was post-World War II Japan, the legendary sword was destroyed, thus lost forever. Number 4. Blackbeard's treasure. The most ruthless pirate of the 7 seas and the Queen Anne's Revenger were eventually defeated in battle. Before he met his fate, old Blackbeard said he buried all of his riches. That was enough to inspire many to look for his booty. One can only imagine what he has buried: gold, jewels, silver. I mean, the possibilities with Blackbeard are endless. He was everywhere. It could be all kinds of amazing stuff there. It's kind of overwhelming to think about. I should go on a treasure hunt. However, it's kind of like that last scene in Breaking Bad. Jack was gonna tell Walt where his money is, but Heisenberg didn't care and ended it. Sometimes ending the reign of an evil man is more important than taking his riches. That's why they got rid of Blackbeard. He's not around no more. Number 3. Libertalia. Uncharted fans, rejoice. So it's the early to mid 1700s, and you're a pirate in the golden age of piracy. Ooh, nice. The Caribbean was a hotbed for your misdeeds. However, sometimes it wasn't so easy to dodge the crown on the seas, and getting caught would mean, well, you'd probably lose your life. It wouldn't be good. So what did a bunch of pirates led by Captain James Mission do? They made their own colony in Madagascar, because you can't boss us around if we're the bosses. Smart. It was called Libertalia. So imagine, if you will, a whole city full of the nastiest, most violent criminals of the 7 seas. Can you imagine what those bars were like? Sadly, however, this may or may not have been true. We're not exactly sure. It sounds like it might not have been true, just made up. But cool if it was though, and then it'd be lost to time, because we'll never find it. Number 2. Feature presentation. As an actor, I find this one pretty cool. The story of the Kelly Gang was released in Australia in 1906 and is regarded as the first feature-length film. With a runtime of over an hour, the movie depicts the story of an old outlaw gang. At the time, the film was doing great and opened in New Zealand as well as England. Pretty cool for the time. Sadly though, for fans of vintage film, which includes me, check out Freaks 1932. It's one of my favorites. Great movie. But like I said, sadly the film was lost and or partially destroyed, meaning the only thing we have left is a few segments of the movie. We've done our best to refurbish the film, but it's been lost to time. Number 1. Atlantis of the Sands. Atlantis of the Sands refers to a legendary lost city in the southern deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, thought to have been destroyed by a natural disaster or as a punishment by God. Known as Ubar, Wabar, or Iram. In 1992, excavations in the area did reveal some sort of city was present many years ago. However, there's not much to be found and many theories have sparked up. This could be a lost city that's mentioned in Islamic holy books and maps. However, some may say the remains of the stone structures that are there are of that of a much later simple fortress, or others think it doesn't even exist at all. So you can go figure, but otherwise it's lost. I found it in Uncharted with Nathan Drake. We found it, but everyone else they didn't find it. But that's okay.
Number 10 is Mount Everest. It's number 10 because of how well known it is, and obviously it comes as no surprise that it even be on this list. Everest is the tallest mountain on Earth, and its climate is one of immense cold and atmospheric pressure changes. This creates what's called the death zone on the uppermost point of the mountain, where oxygen pressure is no longer sufficient to humans. This is around the 26,000 foot point of the mountain. But yet, the challenge and prowess of the climb have drawn mountaineers for centuries. The first recorded deaths are believed to be in 1717, but if we're being realistic, this mountain has probably been a long-term boneyard of adventurers and wanderers alike through history. There is a reported 310 deaths in record, attributed to avalanches, falls, serac collapse, exposure, frostbite, or just health problems related to the conditions on the mountains. Not all bodies have been located, however, so details on those deaths are not always available. There are multiple expeditions that are large groups that have sadly met their ends on Everest. Number 9 is Gold Rush. The Lost Dutchman's gold mine has long since been a focal point of folklore, but for the driven explorer, this gold mine could be anything but a story. According to its legend, in the 19th century, a German man discovered a large gold mine in the Superstition Mountains. It's not until he's on his deathbed in 1981 that he told anyone what he'd found and how he'd been able to live so prosperously for most of his life. And in his weakened state, he drew a very vague map to the supposed money lode. In September of 1982, the Arizona Enterprise went in search of the mine but were never able to locate it. The map and copies were sold eventually for only $7 a piece, and now it's anyone's game. There are several fascinating versions of the legend of the Lost Dutchman's gold mine that have been put forth, and the above story is the most popular version of them all. Multiple people since have lost their lives trying to find this gold mine. In 1934, Adam Stewart died of unknown causes, and in December of 1936, another life was claimed by the mountain when hobbyist Roman O'Hall died from the fall while searching for the Lost Dutchman gold. Number 8 is first of many triangles to come in this video. It's the Bennington Triangle. This triangle is on land and located in the southwestern area of Vermont. This spot is known for its notorious vanishings and cold cases. From 1945 to 1950, 5 people have vanished in this area, essentially one for every year. See, you could pass it off as a serial, but people who vanished range extremely in their ages, ethnicity, and gender. From an to a 74-year-old woman. There's not enough for it to be a preferential serial, that's for sure, but there's still no evidence. So, what could it be? To this day, there's no definite explanation for why those who go exploring or traveling through this region go missing, and no evidence to point authorities as to how, why, or where they even went. Number 7 means putting on the parka, because we're gonna go see Santa Claus in Antarctica. It's the edge of the world. Dark, cold, bleak, and nothing for miles. While it may not seem objectively scary, the harsh reality of Antarctica is desolate and full of bodies. Because even with all of our technology and what we know of the dangers of Antarctica, let alone any other frozen climate, it can remain deadly for anyone who goes there even with the perfect plan and preparedness. On the inland alone, temperatures can plummet to nearly negative 130 Fahrenheit, and in some places wind can reach 200 miles per hour. As a result of many expeditions, scientists and explorers have perished here. Their bodies remain and are often beyond retrieval, buried so deep into ice sheets or crevices that they'll never emerge, or out at sea within glaciers and the calving ice. The oldest bones discovered in Antarctica are reportedly from 1918, and they were discovered in the 1980s. Chilean researchers found that they belonged to a woman who died when she was about 21 years old. She was an indigenous person from southern Chile, which is 620 miles away from Antarctica, and there's no explanation how they got there. Number 6 is another triangle, the Michigan Triangle. Lake Superior and the Great Lakes are known for having many disappearances in, around, and over them. It's safe to say that they're a hot spot for the vanished, and much of that is due to the stories of gold, oil, or just nature lovers traveling out onto the land. Lake Michigan has a triangle formation that extends between the state of Michigan and its neighbor, Wisconsin, and it's gained a reputation for disappearances. One of the most famous was in 1950 when the Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 2501 flew over the area and just never emerged from it. All 58 passengers and crew vanished without a trace. The vast majority of the eerie situations that people reference from Lake Michigan Triangle have occurred between 1850 and 1950. empty, with a few more modern incidents to consider. However, the first reported happening took place in 1679 when a trade ship, Le Griffon, vanished from the Michigan waters. Another ship, the Thomas Hume, also disappeared in a similar fashion. Lake Michigan has taken as many as 6 ships documented, but the most peculiar story actually isn't even a death, though rather a Michigan college student who went missing near the lake while cross-country skiing, only to be found a year later 700 miles away with no memory of the event or his previous life. Number 5 is more water. It's the Sargasso Sea. Ghost ship time. I know you guys are waiting for one of those. Part of the Atlantic Ocean, Sargasso is a pathway for the famous Mary Celeste ghost ship, which was found empty and floating in 1872. Another ship came across the Mary and tried to signal to communicate with the ship but got no response. As they drew closer, it became evident that something is wrong as the sails of the ship were torn to shreds and the ship's compass was broken, and on the sides, someone had made a danger sign with an axe. Mary Celeste had actually left a week earlier than the ship that had found her, and its captain, David Morehouse, had known the captain of the Celeste personally. So his crew made the decision to board, and they found no soul on her. At the same time, the cargo, which was valuable liquor that was being transported on the ship, also was untouched, as was the cabins and the deck. Whatever happened though, it wasn't the first or last time. Sargasso is known for having empty adrift boats. Another in 1840, the French merchant ship Rosalie, was discovered with its sails set, but without any crew members on board. Other ships include the American schooner Ellen Austin and the Connemara. Number 4, you guessed it, another triangle. The Pecos Triangle. Now, this is another land one, this time located in San Miguel County in New Mexico. Pecos is a village just outside of Santa Fe and in the dead center of some of the state's most scenic and popular terrain. The Santa Fe National Forest paired with Pecos' expansive wilderness has made itself known for something other than nature: disappearances. This region is popular for fishing, hiking, and camping, but it seems that many of these weekend excursions and outdoor adventures are destined for a one-way trip, as there's been a documented 5 disappearances, but countless are presumed to be lost in this area. Emma Tresps, Audrey Kaplan, and Melvin Nadell are all well-known examples. Melvin, 61, was a fit gym owner who disappeared in 2009 while out camping with friends. His Jeep was found parked by their site, but Mel was never found. 10 years his senior, Emma Treps, vanished in 1998 on a trip to a monastery that she had done several times. She was confident and knew the area, but she too vanished with only her vehicle to be found. It's also worth noting that the Pecos area is often location of UFO reports, as well as sightings of mysterious dancing lights in the woods and sudden flashes of brilliant light that seems to have no obvious cause. It's easy to see that this is not an area to explore in, as disappearances are not during a particular hour, age, gender, day, season. There's nothing. Lines are off. Number 3 is our last triangle, I promise. It's Lop Nor. It's Asia's Devil Triangle. Lop Nor has a few nicknames even aside from that one, another being the Wandering Sea. Why? Because it's believed that Lake Lop Nor shifted location north and south over a cycle of 1500 years. It's a former saline lake and now a salt-encrusted lake bed. It lies within the Tarim Basin and was the second largest inland lake in China and an important station on the Silk Road. In the latter half of the 19th century, the Lop Desert attracted many of the world's great explorers seeking to discover more about this vast geographic blank spot on the map. Solving the mystery of where the lake would be located would be a significant geographic discovery, and of course many perished in their attempt before it was found. Lop Nor is known as a dangerous area for its strong winds, dry weather, hot temperatures during the day, and extremely low temperatures during the night. Many have lost their lives to avalanches of sand or sandstorms. In 1980, China's most beloved adventurer Peng Xiaomu vanished while revisiting Lop Nor. He had left a note saying he was going to go find some water, but Peng was never seen again and seemingly had vanished from camp. The Chinese government launched a massive search of the desert looking for him, but there was no sign of him ever found. According to those familiar with the dangers of Lop Nor, the famed biologist was most likely buried alive by a freak sandstorm or crushed in an avalanche of loose soil. As many as 6 skeletons have been recovered from Lop Nor since his disappearance, but none of them have been identified as Peng. Number 2 is spooky and scary for sure. It's Hoia Baku. I've actually gotten to see this forest in person, and even from the passenger seat of a car, you can feel something just isn't right. Fenced off, this is considered the world's most haunted forest, and it's located in Romania. Hundreds of disappearances have occurred alongside ghost sightings, UFO appearances, and bizarre sounds, smells, and winds coming from these woods. What makes this forest so dangerous for explorers is how undocumented it is. No one has truly gone deep into these woods and studied the land and environment. No full or detailed map exists of Baku, so when it comes time for a search and rescue, the government and police forces will only go so far into the woods before it becomes too dangerous of losing more people. Romania already doesn't have the best cell and phone signal, and in some rural areas there's none at all, so even a walkie-talkie is capable of losing connection. Those who have passed through the forest without being zapped into another realm have reported rashes, nausea, and feelings of anxiety. Due to the sheer amount of locals, tourists, and explorers having gone missing over the decades, the Romanian government has made the decision to close off much of this forest from public access to prevent more loss of life. Some ghost hunting TV shows have earned special access, however. Guys, I'm a liar because number 1 is actually technically our final triangle. It's the Alaskan Triangle. I just wanted to trick you. More people have disappeared in the Alaskan Triangle than anywhere else. This can be contributed, of course, to the sheer size of Alaska being twice the size of Texas. Naturally, the landscape, as we know, is inhospitable, and very few people actually inhabit the region. The interest in the Alaskan Triangle began when House Majority Leader Hale Boggs' private craft seemingly vanished into thin air while flying over top. It caused the nation's largest search and rescue mission, but showed up nothing, even with 50 civilian planes and 40 military crafts coming in high and low. It's almost understandable, as it is a vast expanse of forest, mountain, lakes, and blank ice terrain. While it's not a surprise it'd be easy for people to go missing in the environment, what's shocking though is the amount of people. As previously stated, more people go missing here than anywhere else, usually without a shred of evidence and no body ever found. You ready for this? More than 16,000 people, including airline passengers and hikers, locals, and tourists, have disappeared within the Alaskan Triangle since 1988. The rate per 1,000 people is more than twice the national missing persons average, and the rate of people who are never found is even higher. It's no debate that the numbers imply something else is happening here than merely getting lost in the mountains, but yet explorers still plunge themselves deep into the Alaskan wilderness in search of rumored treasure or historic artifacts.
Kicking off today's list, we have the Bermuda Triangle, also referred to as the Devil's Triangle. It's an area between the coasts of Miami, Puerto Rico, and, you guessed it, Bermuda, that's been home to way too many disappearances by boat and by plane to be normal by my personal definition of the term. Historically speaking, the first notable disappearance was the HMS Atalanta in 1840, who disappeared with her entire crew after setting sail from the Royal Naval Dockyard, Bermuda, for Falmouth, England on January 31st. While it's presumed a storm was the reason for her fate, and the search for evidence attracted worldwide attention, nothing was ever found. If you'd prefer to talk about flights, on December 28th of 1948, a Douglas DC-3 aircraft disappeared while on a flight from San Juan, Puerto Rico to Miami. No trace of the aircraft or the, 32 people on board was ever found. More recently, in late July of 2015, two 14-year-old boys, Austin Stefanos and Perry Cohen, went on a fishing trip in their 19-foot boat. Despite the, 15,000 square nautical mile wide search by the Coast Guard, the pair's boat was found a year later off the coast of Bermuda, but the boys were never seen again. And there's plenty more stories where these came from, which is why I can't write off the Bermuda Triangle as a simple coincidence area. Trust me, I'd be here all day if we went through all of them. In ninth place, we have Stonehenge. Anyone want to guess what this might be if you don't already know? Yep, a big pile of rocks. How'd you guess? So Stonehenge is a prehistoric monument located on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, England. It consists of an outer ring of vertical standing stones, each around 13 feet high, 7 feet wide, and weighing around 25 tons, topped by connecting horizontal stones. Inside is a ring of smaller blue stones, and past those are freestanding trilithons, which are two bulkier vertical stones joined by a connecting horizontal stone. Archaeologists believe that Stonehenge was constructed around 3000 BC to 2000 BC. And now that I've gotten the factual mumbo jumbo out of the way, here's the fun mystery. Stonehenge was produced by a culture that left no written records. Most aspects, such as how it was built and for what purposes it was used, remain subject to debate and many myths. There is little or no direct evidence revealing the construction techniques used by the builders. Over the years, various researchers have suggested that supernatural or anachronistic methods were used, usually asserting that the stones were impossible to move otherwise due to their massive size. In 8th place, we have the Great Library of Alexandria. Located in Egypt, it was one of the largest and most significant libraries of the ancient world. The library acquired many papyrus scrolls, owing largely to the Ptolemaic king's aggressive and well-funded policies for procuring texts. It is unknown exactly just how many scrolls were housed at any given time, but estimates range from 40 to 400,000 at its height. Alexandria came to be regarded as the capital of knowledge and learning, in part because of the Great Library. Many important and influential scholars worked at the library during the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, including Callimachus, who wrote the Penachos, considered to be the world's first library catalog, and Eratosthenes of Cyrene, who calculated the circumference of the Earth within a few hundred kilometers of accuracy. Between 270 and 275 AD, the city of Alexandria saw a Ptolemaic invasion and an imperial counterattack that completely destroyed the library. The Serapeum, which was the daughter library, was vandalized and demolished in 391 AD under a decree issued by Bishop Theophilus Papyrus of Alexandria, and with that, all of the knowledge that was in this library was lost forever. Researchers have tried valiantly to recover what could have existed in this vast library of knowledge, but the unknown looms over all of us. In 7th place, we have the sunken city of Dwarka. Until roughly 50 years ago, it was simply a legend, nothing more. A marine scientist discovered the remnants of the underwater civilization near the coast of Dwarka, the city that's still on land that is, in the 1970s. And in 2002, scientists discovered an extremely advanced civilization from the past, lying untouched just beneath the ocean's surface. Thanks to carbon testing, it was established that the city is anywhere between 7,000 to 9,500 years old and stretches out 7 to 8 kilometers long and about 3 to 4 kilometers in width. The most fascinating, or creepy thing about this underwater city, depending on your point of view, is that all the human remains are still intact. During the 2002 excavation of Dwarka, many mud vessels, temple bells, ancient ritualistic vessels, and other artifacts were found, with the carbon dating indicating that they date back to roughly 7200 BC, otherwise known as the prehistoric period. At the time of this research, scientists also found a massive man-made wall that's almost 2,000 feet tall that has since been unearthed during periods of low tide and can somewhat be easily seen now. It'll be fascinating to see if we ever learn about how the city was built, or scientifically what led to the submerging and historical loss of the location outside of mythology. In 6th place, we have the death of Sir Harry Oakes. As someone who grew up visiting one of his former homes, now the Museum of Northern History, I knew I couldn't leave him off my list. Sir Harry earned his fortune in Canada and moved to the Bahamas in the 1930s for tax evasion purposes. He arrived in Kirkland Lake in northeastern Ontario, Canada on June 19th of 1911, and in September of that same year, he registered the transfer of claim T1663, purchased from George Miniker, and established Lakeshore Mine. 20 years later, the gold mine was the most productive in the Western Hemisphere, and it ultimately proved to be the second largest gold mine in the Americas. It's no longer in operation, but plenty of other gold mines around the Kirkland Lake area are. On the evening of July 8th of 1943, while living in the Bahamas, shortly after midnight, Harry had his life brutally ended. He was struck 4 times behind the left ear with a miner's handpick to disguise the wounds from a silver ice pick, and was then burned all over his body using insecticide, with the flames being concentrated around the eyes. And here's where it gets really weird. His body was then sprinkled with feathers from a mattress. When he was discovered, the feathers were still being gently blown over his body by the bedroom fan. The Bahamas governor, the Duke of Windsor, who had become a close friend of Harry's during the previous 3 years, took charge of the investigation from the get-go, inviting 2 American policemen he knew from Miami to take over the case instead of the locals. The 2 American policemen had forgotten their fingerprint kits in Miami, but conveniently, the local Bahamas police force had fingerprint kits available in Nassau. By evening time on the second day of the investigation, 36 hours after his body had been discovered, they had arrested his son-in-law, Count Alfred de Marigny. Count Alfred was on bad terms with Harry, due to his playboy manners and lack of a meaningful career, and the fact that he had been married twice before for short periods to wealthy women, and that he had not asked Harry's permission to marry his daughter Nancy. Alfred was acquitted in a trial that lasted several weeks after the detectives were suspected of fabricating evidence against him. The chief piece of evidence was a fingerprint of his, which one of the officers claimed had been found on a Chinese screen in Oakes' bedroom where the body had been found. It was later discovered that the print had been lifted from the water glass that Alfred had used during his questioning by the Miami police captains. So, who killed Sir Harry Oakes? The theories that have emerged since 1943 have ranged from a killer reappearing from Oakes' Canadian past, to a rage-filled secret lover, to a hitman sent by mobster Meyer Lansky. Make of that what you will. There's a lot of really fun books out there about it. In 5th place, we have the mysterious Roanoke Colony. In 1587, 121 colonists led by John White arrived on Roanoke Island in what would be present-day North Carolina to establish a colony. As tensions mounted with the local population, John White opted to return to England to gather reinforcements and supplies. But when he returned several years later, the settlement was completely deserted, with no signs of a struggle and no remains to be found anywhere. The settlement became known as the Lost Colony, and none of its members were ever seen again. In 4th place, time to talk about Jimmy Hoffa. Known for his involvement in organized crime, Jimmy disappeared in Oakland County, Michigan on July 30th of 1975 and was declared legally dead in 1982. The identity of his killer, or killers, and the location of his body are ongoing mysteries. Police and forensic anthropologists have searched a number of sites in Detroit and Oakland County to no avail. Most recently, on October 25th and 26th of 2021, FBI agents visited a former landfill in New Jersey to conduct a site survey. Following following a deathbed confession by a landfill worker claiming that people had trusted him and his father with burying Hoffa's body in a steel barrel under the dump in 1975. The agents apparently didn't find this steel barrel. The identity of his killer is also unclear. Before his death in 2006, Richard the Iceman Kuklinski, a hitman, claimed to have ended Jimmy and dumped his body in a scrapyard, but a number of police officers have casted their doubt on the confession. As the years go by, it appears increasingly unlikely that Hoffa's remains or his actual killer will ever be found. In third place, we have the missing tomb of Cleopatra. If you're unaware of her legacy, Cleopatra was Queen of Egypt from 51 to 30 BC and its last active ruler. When she realized her kingdom was about to be no longer, she refused to become a Roman prisoner and ended her own life. Popular belief is that she allowed an asp or Egyptian cobra to bite and poison her. Now, no venomous snake was found with her body, but she did have tiny puncture wounds on her arm that could have been caused by a needle. After her passing, Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire, marking the end of the last Hellenistic state in the Mediterranean. Unlike other famous monarchs from that time period, attempts to find her tomb, where she is buried next to her beloved Antony, have never been successful. Excavations carried out by Kathleen Martinez have yielded 10 mummies and 27 tombs of Egyptian nobles, as well as coins bearing images of Cleopatra and carvings showing her and her lover in an embrace. So far, though, the tomb itself remains elusive, but temple excavations continue, with additional sites below the surface identified using ground-penetrating radar since around 2011. In second place, we have the disappearance of Amelia Earhart. She was an American aviation pioneer, being the first female aviator to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. She set many other records and was one of the first aviators to promote commercial air travel, wrote best-selling books about her flying experiences, along with being instrumental in the formation of the 99s, an organization for female pilots. On July 2nd of 1937, Amelia Earhart flew towards Howland Island, one of the last stops on her attempt to be the first woman to fly around the world. Nearing the tiny Pacific island, she radioed the Itasca, a United States Coast Guard cutter anchored off of Howland's coast, to ask it to guide her onto land with radio signals, saying, "We must be on you but cannot see you, gas is running low, been unable to reach you by radio, we're flying at 1,000 feet. Earhart's last confirmed message indicated that she was flying on a northwest to southeast navigational line that bisected the island, but she did not indicate in which direction she was heading. After that communication at 8:43 a.m., several expedition sends have tried to locate the plane's wreckage, but have had zero luck. By studying Amelia's final radio transmissions and calculating what is known about the plane's fuel supply, researchers have narrowed their search to a 630 square mile area of the ocean. Theories about what happened have ranged in extremes, from simply crashing and sinking, to being captured and held as a war prisoner, living as castaways that were never found, that it was a government cover-up, or she simply restarted her life in anonymity. Feel free to post your favorite theory in the comments. I'd love to know. And in first place, we have Jack the Ripper. What? I thought I'd end today on an easy note, something we can all fall asleep to. Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer active in and around the Whitechapel district of London, England in the autumn of 1888. Attacks from Jack the Ripper typically involved female ladies of the night who lived and worked in the slums of the East End of London. Their throats were cut prior to abdominal mutilations, and the removal of internal organs from at least 3 of the victims led to speculation that their killer had some sort of anatomical or surgical knowledge. Rumors that the deaths were connected intensified in September and October of 1888, and numerous letters were received by media outlets and Scotland Yard from individuals claiming to be the Ripper. The From Hell letter, received by George Lusk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, came with half a preserved human kidney, allegedly taken from one of the victims. Extensive newspaper coverage bestowed widespread and enduring international notoriety on the Ripper, and the legend solidified. The concentration of killings around weekends and public holidays, and within a short distance of each other, has indicated to many that the Ripper was in regular employment and lived locally. Others have vehemently stated that the killer was an educated upper-class man, possibly a doctor or an aristocrat, who ventured into Whitechapel from a more well-to-do area. The killings were never solved, and the legends surrounding these crimes became a combination of historical research, folklore, and pseudo-history, capturing public imagination until this day. And that brings us to the end of our list, and my curiosity is definitely piqued. What can I say? I was obsessed with the mystery of the lost Grand Duchess Anastasia growing up, and that's been solved in my lifetime. I'm gonna try to hold out hope for this one.